Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number one in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda.Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and this is Season 7, Episode 267. Before I continue with today's topic, I just want to extend my thanks to everybody out there who's been listening. We are almost at 90K downloads per week. That is fantastic. We are global and we are growing. So again, thank you. I'm very, very grateful. So you might be asking, okay, well, what's today's topic? Gave you a hint last time. The topic today is gender policing. That is how boys learn to be men and how social conditioning starts early. And I'm going to talk about long-term effects. So let's dive into the tapestry of influences that shape our understanding of masculinity. From the often subtle cues of our earliest environments to the undeniable impact of fatherhood, which really can set the stage for our lifelong perceptions about manhood. Along the way, I'm also going to examine the current mental health crisis among men and the allure of the manosphere, including a little bit about this very controversial figure like Andrew Tate. My hope is that by the end of our conversation, we'll have sharpened our insights, elevated our empathy, and expanded our capacity for meaningful transformation. So what is this thing called gender policing? It's a term that encapsulates the way in which cultural norms, social feedback loops, and institutional structures coerce us into conforming to prescribed ideas of what boys, men, and women should be. So let's break it down. So early environments, even before we can actually articulate our identity, we internalize messages from our caregivers, peers, and media about what's appropriate for boys. So we have, particular toys, colors, i.e. blue, and emotional expression are commonly categorized as for boys or for girls, reinforcing a very strong binary that can feel, for a lot of people, suffocating, including children. Now, by the time a boy enters primary school, he's often already adept at centering his tears or concealing softer impulses, afraid of being labelled weak. Now, A client once shared with me that his brother used to tap him on the shoulder when his brother made the decision that he was acting girly. All right. Now, if you're constantly exposed to that, after a while, you're going to keep checking yourself. All right. Not a healthy thing to happen, and often in the long run ends up with a strong sense of anxiety. Now, the other aspect to this is cultural narratives. We have tons of stories in children's books, films, and advertising that repeatedly depict males as stoic protectors or solitary adventurers. Now, while some of these archetypes can be sort of aspirational in some contexts, they are narrow, and they narrow the emotional bandwidth boys are allowed to experience. Now, the deeper tragedy in all of this is that this conditioning is largely invisible, and it's been normalized to the point where challenging it can seem like an act of rebellion. But unfortunately, nowhere is the pressure more potent than in the home, where a father's influence can validate or undermine a boy's sense of self. Fathers who operate within a strict patriarchal framework deliver these social imperatives with an extra dose of familial authority, making them feel indisputable. Now, Dr. Michael Flood and his team did some research, and one of the things that they found was that boys growing up with patriarchal fathers are significantly more patriarchal than their fathers. So not only is the stereotype perpetuated, but it's also increased, amplified. So as a developmental process, let's look at the father's role. And with that, I want to talk about some strategies for improving fathering. So there's an immense power in being a dad. It is an immense power to nurture boys who grow into empathic, emotionally healthy men. It is satisfying for me as a dad to see that happen with my son. So here are some concrete strategies for improving fathering in a world still strongly influenced by restrictive gender expectations. So the first one is dads need to get comfortable in modeling emotional openness. Children learn emotional expression or suppression merely by observing parents. A father who allows himself to be seen crying, worrying, or celebrating helps normalize a full range of feelings for his kids. Share stories from your own life. Express things like, I felt really sad today, and it helped to talk about it. It also is useful in that context to talk about how you may have felt in different situations that your son may be currently experiencing. But the main thing that it does is it teaches boys that it's natural to express and process emotions. The other part of it is it's really important to emphasize respect and collaboration. Traditional parenting models often default to a top-down authority structure. It's my way, i.e. dad's way, or the highway. What's better, more helpful, more psychologically healthy is to engage in a dialogue with your child. Look for their perspectives and validate their experiences. One of the things I talk about is Socratic parenting. Ask your child, your son, pertinent, open-ended questions. Encourage sons also to see partnership and teamwork as cornerstones of strong relationships. And that starts with a partnership between dad and son. And that doesn't mean that you're equal. What it means is that as a dad, I still have an authoritative place, but I'm going to share, the whole process of working through something, of problem solving, of making decisions um, in a much more collaborative way. Now, ultimately, there's going to be a few things where you go, look, son, I've heard and listened to you, but this decision is mine, and this is the reason why I'm making it. And then not get into constantly rehashing it or renegotiating it. Another important skill, and we talk a lot about this, but it sort of seems to get often lost in translation, is the need to foster empathy and nurturing skills. So one of the ways to do that is invite boys to participate in caregiving tasks, preparing meals, looking after siblings or pets, and showing kindness to friends. When fathers do this alongside their sons, they teach by example that nurturing isn't women's work, it's human work. Applaud moments of compassion or helpfulness as much as you would a sports accomplishment. This rebalances the scales where physical prowess is traditionally over-celebrated. Now, again, emotional literacy is one of the cornerstones in being able to process feelings effectively. It's important to introduce boys particularly that an emotional vocab goes beyond happy or mad. Words like disappointed, anxious, or overjoyed help children and adults articulate nuanced feeling. Read books or watch films with your son that explore a variety of emotions. Then talk about them. Make it open. And this is up for discussion. Now, also, if you notice that your child's upset, try saying, I see you're feeling frustrated. Is there something that we can do to help? Or what is it that you need from me right now? Instead of dismissing their distress. In order to be able to do that with a sense of comfort, all of us, men, as a dad, need to confront our own conditioning. Fatherhood is an ongoing journey, not a destination. Reflect on the lessons you learned about masculinity, both the good and the harmful, and decide which ones are worth passing down. Be willing to admit mistakes. If you find yourself imposing rigid rules or criticizing emotional vulnerability, own it and correct course. Growth is a powerful teaching tool. Now, this is really, really important, but collaborate with mother figures and community. Healthy fathering doesn't happen in isolation. Work together with mothers, grandparents, and other caregivers to maintain consistency and mutual support. You want to seek out fatherhood programs, workshops, or support groups that encourage compassionate, thoughtful parenting strategies. The more fathers model these behaviors for one another, the more it becomes the norm. Now, by focusing on empathy, open communication, and a willingness to challenge inherited biases, we as dads can transform not only our children's lives, but also the broader cultural narrative around what it means to be a man. Now, social conditioning and its long-term effects. People often want to know, is there really any harm in any of this? And my comment is absolutely. Let's take a look at this larger level of conditioning, often shaped by patriarchal ideals that I've spoken about in previous podcasts. And let's look at how they can undermine mental and emotional well-being. So emotional repression is one of the key aspects in this. From a young age, boys are groomed to hide tears, swallow fears, and maintain a facade of composure. This limiting emotional vocabulary sets men up for isolation, self-medication, and or eruptive anger in adulthood. The second part to this is excessive competition and, the ideal of dominance. Many cultures overvalue competitiveness amongst boys, conflating aggression with competence or status. We're a good example of this. Watch Wolf of Wall Street or Game of Thrones or, Succession, any of these things. Men who grow up under these pressures may come to believe that their whole worth is tied to how many wins they can achieve. And that doesn't matter whether it's in sport, business, or in relationships. And in relationships, women become a commodity. Now, the other one is that whole thing about our fear of appearing weak. And this is perhaps the most insidious effect on boys is to be labeled a pussy or weak or unmanly or a girl. And this fear stifles authentic self-expression. It certainly also fosters homophobia or misogyny and can block any pathway to emotional healing. The cumulative result is a staggering prevalence of mental health struggles amongst men. And let me include boys, because I see it from 13 onwards. It includes higher rates of substance abuse, heightened risk of suicidal ideation, and anxiety and depression. Fathers who actively model healthier emotional lives can greatly mitigate these cultural pressures and provide a counterbalance to this very negative social conditioning. So, the current mental health issues are not abating. The standout issues currently are underdiagnosed anxiety and underdiagnosed depression. There's still, amongst a lot of boys and men, a strong stigma about seeking help. We're conditioned to almost intrinsically believe that seeking help is a concession of weakness, that we're broken. And a lot of guys never step into a counsellor's office. If they do, they often struggle to articulate their feelings, essentially because they've spent a lifetime bottling them up. And finally, and this is very much a key, and not confined to older men, is social isolation. Patriarchal masculinity does not encourage men to form the same depth of social support networks that women do. This leaves men more vulnerable when in a crisis. So, a key element in the Making Good Men Great framework is to emphasize the importance of dismantling old scripts and prioritizing community openness and self-inquiry. Fathers play a pivotal role here by showing boys that mental health is as fundamental as physical health. And it is a work in progress. You don't go to the gym once or twice to get fitter. It's an ongoing experience. Now, I mentioned earlier the manosphere and figures like Andrew Tate. So one way to do this is to examine how unmet emotional needs and a lack of constructive male role models can make men susceptible to the manosphere, to the toxic environment where patriarchal stereotypes are, basically held up as a role model. And one guy in particular that stands out is Andrew Tate. So what is the manosphere? Well, simply, it's a collection of online communities ranging from men's rights forums to incel message boards and pickup artists' channels, offering what they offer fundamentally is a sense of belonging to men who feel alienated and disempowered. And the likes of Andrew Tate wave in front of them a magic wand on how to join being powerful and wealthy. Now, some segments aim to address legitimate concerns about men's mental health. However, a lot of spaces legitimize misogyny, hyperaggression, and a regressive view of gender roles. Now, what's Andrew Tate's appeal? Well, his appeal comes down to his message, and his message zeroes in on disaffected young men who are hungry for validation, structure, and a clear identity. He leverages their frustration by promising power, control, success, and dominance. By glorifying a narrow form of masculinity, high status, emotional invulnerability, material wealth, he echoes the very ideals of patriarchy. And any deviation from the norm frames vulnerability and compassion as weak. So you might want to ask the question, why does it resonate? Well, young boys, teenagers yearn for guidance, but are wary of the stigma around seeking professional help or therapeutic help. So in Andrew Tate's sort of universe, there's a feeling of a quick solution and solace, right? So it seems like an easy process. Certainly one of the other ones that it creates is a sense of belonging, that there's others like me out there. Now, again, if we offset this with fathers who exemplify open-hearted leadership and who can give their children the understanding to discriminate between harmful ideologies and real confidence, then to reject them, we're on a winning streak. A son who grows up witnessing his father blend strength with empathy is less inclined to believe in the zero-sum game of dominance. So, as always, I'm on about how do we break the cycle? Well, as I've said before, and I've reiterated, and this is what this season is about, we need to heal through reflection. Personal growth precedes social change. Fathers and men in general need to confront the cultural, familial, and personal narrative that they've absorbed and decide what to carry forward and what to discard. A humble acknowledgement of imperfection sends a powerful message to children that growth is constant. We need to rewrite masculinity. We need to create more diverse role models. We need to engage in emotionally literate parenting. We need to empower sons and our daughters to voice their emotions and collaborate in problem solving rather than resorting to, authority-based discipline alone, the autocratic model. And we need to critically engage with media. Develop a practice of mindful media consumption. Question narratives that exalt dominance as the sole path to respect, especially in today's society where autocracy seems to be taking over. And absolutely, we need to challenge the echo chambers of the manosphere in social media. We need to do that by introducing nuanced perspectives. Look at philosophers, psychologists, and community leaders who champion holistic views of masculinity. Now, one block to this is that there seems to be a very strong underpinning of what's called biological reductionism. That is, a lot of things come down to dopamine, serotonin, neuroscience and so on. And that's all very well, but it's simplistic and often inaccurate. When we talk about being holistic, it includes developmental milestones, social influences. It is the very nature versus nurture. And it's not versus, it's an and also. So let me wind down today. What I'm looking to help everybody who listens to this, and including myself, remember, is that this is a journey toward a liberated, authentically human masculinity that begins with awareness. It's an awareness of our inherited scripts, our unexpressed emotions, and the society that shapes us. As fathers, we have the unique power to break cycles of patriarchal conditioning by actively choosing empathy, collaboration, emotional availability, and vulnerability. So what's today's takeaway, folks? Recognize how your approach to fathering can either perpetuate or transform rigid masculine norms. Model emotional openness and relational aspects. Show children that strength and vulnerability are complementary human traits. Equip your sons with the capacity to discriminate, to navigate online influences like Andrew Tate and the broader manosphere. Champion vulnerability as a cornerstone of real strength. I am human. I make mistakes. I try not to make too many, but I do. Open a new path for men to experience deeper relationships. Your own, your boys, your friends. Develop and focus on genuine confidence, not bravado, not arrogance, not narcissism, and focus on improved mental health. So let me thank you for joining me on this journey and inspired change with Gunter. If this episode struck a chord, please share it widely. Reach out on social media or via email if you have questions or insights. Let's continue forging a new vision of masculinity, one rooted in empathy, resilience, and authentic feelings of empowerment. So until next time, stay open, stay curious, and let's keep inspiring change together. And as a final note, let me express my desire to bring in some sponsors. Again, if this message resonates with you and you are in a business or you are in a position of influence, let's work together and grow together. Now, in order for me to do this, it would be nice to get some financial return because this is my time. It takes time to research. It's my years of expertise, and it's about some sense of being valued. Have a think about it. So until next time, this is me signing off.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.